Okay, to make a long story short, right now I'm at Universal Orlando going to Halloween Horror Nights. So this is being filmed back in the end of August. I'm not going to lie about that. I'm not going to lie to you guys. So these are not the reviews you are looking for. Those will not be out until October, actually. So I apologize for that. But we get kind of behind in September because of that fact. But we do have a lot of limited and indie releases that we're going to talk about today, and what we're going to be talking about next week as well. So, AJ, take it away.
Alright. We're going to start with Terry Gilliam's new movie, The Zero Theorem. If you were watching the press junket for Django, you probably saw that Christoph Waltz looked a little different than he normally did. As if he had shaved his head and had no facial hair. We learned quickly it was because of this movie, where he plays somebody that has no hair on his body whatsoever. It's set in a very, very Gilliam world, where that could just be like its own thing. That could be its own genre. It's Gilliam world.
Yeah, that sounds like a theme park. I don't know if I would go to that theme park, but
it'd be a trippy one.
PCP as soon as you walk in the front gate.
Yes, flying Jonathan Pryce to greet you. So we have we start, and Christoph Waltz is this character who has basically confined himself to living in a church that was abandoned, and his job is to basically sit in front of a computer all day and decode things or something.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there, and he anxiously answers the phone every time it rings, like he's waiting for something, and he's always disappointed. Eventually he's at work, and he keeps getting bothered by Joby, who is David Thewlis. And Joby is basically his kind of boss, who talks to him about a promotion. But before we get to that, it's basically set in this world that's, there's no way to describe it, Gilliam world. It's a really interesting contrast because Walt's character looks like, his name is Cohen with a Q, but Joey keeps calling him Quinn, and every single time Walt has to tell him, no, it's Cohen, there's no U. And he has this weird character quirk where he never says I, he always says we, as if he's got multiple personalities, but that's not even a thing. It's just what he does. He doesn't have multiple personalities. He just says we instead of I.
Alright.
And he's really pale because he almost never comes out of this church except to go to work. And he dresses in all black. He looks like one of Mr. Hand's guys from Dark City. Hey, if you ever want to remake, I hope you don't, but if you ever make Dark City, I'd look at Christoph Waltz. And it's this really interesting contrast because he comes out, and despite the fact that it's got like the gray buildings that go past the sky, this world is mostly like really colorful and lit up, kind of like Blade Runner. And just seeing Walt walk through this as this really pale guy dressed in black in this really colorful world is this really interesting contrast, and pretty much tells you everything you need to know about the character. When everything's really, really happy and jovial, he probably won't be, despite being in the middle of it. So he goes to work one day, and he's told about how management, who is this unseen force played by Matt Damon, you see his picture around every now. I don't think we really know if that's what management actually looks like, or if it's just a logo, and Cohen imagines management as that figure. I don't know, but because pretty much every time we actually see management in human form, it's in Cohen's mind, so it's hard to say.
It's like tech support in Vanilla Sky.
Yeah. So, he gets this job to try to basically decode the Zero Theorem, which is basically totally and completely unsolvable. And he gets the help from Bob. Bob is the kid that got stabbed with scissors in Moonrise Kingdom. And he was the stepbrother in Labor Day. He's got a full part here, finally. In a Gilliam movie, no less. He scored that really quick. So yes, this and there's a side plot with this woman Bainsley, who he meets at Joby's party. And she basically always wants to be around him because he basically owes her because she saved his life when Joby was trying to get him to have fun, and he said, "Here, eat something," and he shoved an olive into his mouth, and he ended up choking on it. So Bainsley took him outside and gave him the Heimlich maneuver and saved his life. So now she just basically kind of stalks him around, and gets sent to his house for work, and just keeps popping up in his life. So finally, she does her best to get her romance to blossom, and they have a relationship where they basically do the motion capture scene in Holy Motors. Basically that, with a little Demolition Man.
Sounds awesome. I love Holy Motors.
You know what I mean? So, yeah, that's basically the main stories going on. Obviously this is one of those movies where the main reason to watch it is to get lost in Gilliam World. Because this would be a perfect companion piece to Brazil. It's got kind of that guy just, doing his job, but has, the big fantasies and all that, and the delusions, and is stuck in this world. There are these two characters called the Clones that come by to keep making sure everything's going alright with Bob and the Zero Theorem and everything. And, oh my god, those characters are so fucking Gilliam, you do not know. They're basically the Bob Hoskins and De Niro characters from Brazil, basically. And they just come in and out of the movie, in case you forgot it was a Gilliam movie. Like I talked about with Woody Allen and Magic in the Moonlight, this seems like a movie that Gilliam would have made in, like, his weird-ass prime. Like I said, like a companion piece to Brazil. That's exactly what it is. And Walt is so great here. I know, like, saying Walt was great in a movie is like saying, well, one thing about the Earth is that it has water. But, yeah, this is one of his more really out there performances, but he's all Waltz, obviously. Like, he's one of those actors that everybody loves, but at the same time, you kind of get a sense that he's very Christoph Waltz right now. But no, it's a really great part, and he's really, really great here. It's probably one of the better performances of this year, at least in, like, a male leading role. The only actor I didn't really care for in the movie was the actress playing Bainsley. I don't know if it's her, it might just be the character, because the character's kind of annoying, and, you don't really... She seems a little off and shady sometimes, but, for the most part, she's trustworthy, and we're supposed to like her, but I don't know. It may have been the actress, I don't know. But, it's really, there's another cast member I forgot about, mainly because I didn't recognize her right away. It actually took me a long time to recognize her. Now that I've said that, you won't be surprised at all that it was Tilda Swinton. She is Cohen's psychiatrist, who is, she's a psychiatrist that's a monitor, on his monitor, basically. I don't know if she's, like, a real person that's talking to him, or if she's part of, like, a program in his computer, I don't know, but... I didn't know it was her until she has this thing where she basically unmasks herself, like she's wearing a wig and she takes off glasses, and it's a little weird because she basically does her equivalent of the Chris Cooper rap from the Muppets. That scene's weird, but oddly enough, it was the first time I realized it was Tilda Swinton.
That's interesting.
It's funny the little things they throw in there, like the futuristic things, like I said, the Holy Motors suits, and Bob keeps ordering pizza, and when the pizza shows up, like, immediately, and it's, like, this woman in, like, this really tight plastic suit, or rubber suit, or with, like, a shirt and short shorts, but they're, like, the futuristic...
Demolition Man.
Basically.
Yeah.
And every time you open the pizza box, it's a little jingle.
Awesome!
And Walt's character is, like, he's basically doing everything to just kind of stay, bland. Like, he eats food that doesn't have flavor, and he has no color in the room, and he's just trying to make his main focus is only on the monitors and his phone, because he's basically he keeps saying he's waiting for this phone call that's gonna, like, basically tell him the meaning of life, and he's been waiting for it his whole life. That's why he always has to be home to be by the phone, in case... that call comes that tells him the meaning of life. um, so with all that blameness, Bob is trying to, like, get him to try pizza, and then you have Bainsley that's trying to get into... They always go to this beach when they go to the virtual reality thing, and she's like, why don't you imagine something and take us somewhere? And it's a black hole in space. So yes, this movie is real, and it might possibly be hard to keep up with because it's doing a lot of weird, ambiguous things, but that's pretty much a Gilliam movie in general. So, like I said, if you're a Gilliam fan, I suppose the last time we technically saw Gilliam World was probably Dr. Parnassus.
Yes.
But that kind of felt a little Gilliam light, whereas this is like him like at his absolute fullest. If you're a Gilliam fan, I think you'll definitely easily take to this. Because there is, I just, no, I don't think I would have generally liked this that much. Like, I think it's because they took an actor that I love as much as Waltz. Maybe that helped, having him as the lead. An actor that I already love that much. But there was something about this one that I just loved. Like, it took me a while to get into Brazil. I think, need to watch it again. But, yeah, I would say, if you're a huge Gilliam fan, or you're a huge Waltz fan, this should be really easy for you to take and digest. But, if you're just kind of going into it, I don't know, you might be a little weirded out. But this is definitely something Gilliam would have made back in the day, back in the 80s. I'm kind of surprised it took, like, I don't know how long it took this script to get to him, but it has him written all over it. So, yeah, that does come recommended, but only if you're in, like, the right crowd for it. Obviously. You could say that about all Gilliam's movies, I'd say. Except Monty Python. I don't think Monty Python's for everybody.
Yes.
Our second movie is a movie I felt like I waited forever for. It was at it had a screening at Cannes. I think that's where it started. The Rover is the new movie from the director of Animal Kingdom. That stars, he brought Guy Pearce back, and he's added Robert Pattinson to the cast. Steve McNairy's also in there in a really small part. What happens is it's kind of vague on what exactly this post-apocalyptic world is, but, words come up that just say 10 years after Australia, 10 years after the collapse. We don't know if that's a financial collapse, a collapse of society. Something went horribly wrong, and now pretty much the entire, at least this area, of course then again it's Australia, pretty much everything just looks like an endless desert everywhere. And these three criminals who just had a botched job of sorts, I don't really recall getting many of the details on that, but it's not really important. But we have Robert Pattinson and Scoot McNairy as his brother. And McNairy and the crew have gotten away injured, and they left Pattinson for dead, because he was wounded, and they just left him there. So they pull up to this place where Guy Pearce is there getting a drink and just sitting. And they accidentally wreck their truck, so they get out and they steal Guy Pearce's car and take off in it. And we're supposed to assume that Pearce has been ruined by the collapse. So he's basically... This was basically the straw that broke the camel's back with whatever was happening in his life. So he takes their busted-ass truck and chases after them. And he becomes determined to get his car back from them. That's all he wants. But eventually he comes across Pattinson, who is angry that they left him for dead, so he willingly helps Pearce go track them down. That's basically what the main plot is. This is one of those movies where, for the most part, the dialogue is really scarce, and it's mostly just people either driving, or getting shot, or sitting in silence, fuming with anger. But then you have the Pattinson character who's kind of... They kind of have that relationship you've seen before, where it's the character that's way too chatty and the character that doesn't say anything at all. They're basically like Carl and Gare from Fargo driving down the road. But I did love that, the way they were doing two totally different things. Because Guy Pearce is really great here. He's doing this really internal thing, where he's one of those characters where he doesn't have to say much, but just by looking at his face, you know that he's seen shit, and he's basically at the very end of his rope and is gonna do anything just to get his car back. And Pattinson is doing the thing with... This was kind of interesting. Hear me out for a second, because it might sound weird, but as far as his acting style, not the role, but the acting style and the way he plays it, I feel like Pattinson was kind of doing Heath Ledger in Brokeback. Like, there was the southern accent, and he was kind of mumbling and talking out of the side of his mouth. That was really the vibe I was getting. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but that was the vibe I was getting. Obviously, like Animal Kingdom, it's one of those movies where it's a violent movie, but it's not overly violent. And when the violence happens, it's like in really sudden bursts that catch you off guard. There's one particular death in this movie that's so holy shit awesome that was out of fucking nowhere that I loved. So, eventually in their journey, not only are they looking for the crew, but they also have other obstacles. Like, there's guys at the beginning of the movie that Pierce bought a gun from that he's pissed off they're after him. And I guess this has to do with the job at the beginning. It's kind of ambiguous, but there's military after Pattinson that are driving around in a Hummer looking for him. So they have all of this stuff in their way. And the tension gets really, really big in places. So some of it is just kind of them driving or just them walking through the desert, but when that tension comes, it's really, really present. And even the scenes with them just doing whatever, just like I said, just seeing these two opposite characters just kind of work, and watch Guy Pearce and Robert Pattinson work off each other. Because we know how underrated Twilight has made Robert Pattinson as an actor.
Yeah.
Because people had this perception of what he was as an actor, just the pale guy that stared, but clearly we know he wants to be a real actor, and he's really making the right decisions to get himself there, and he's really showing off that he can do it too. And he's also, I'm somehow great. Guy Pearce is obviously Pattinson is great too, and can really, he's right there with Pearce to kind of counterbalance what he's doing.
He's gone up in my book a lot since Water for Elephants and Cosmopolis, and Remember Me and all the good performances he's had.
Excited for Master of the Stars too.
Most definitely.
There's this scene, and like the one problem some people might have with this movie is it's so relentlessly bleak. Obviously, as you know, most post-apocalyptic movies tend to be. But there's one scene that kind of balances that out. It is really violent and really grimy and really, you know, gritty and every other adjective like that.
Yeah.
There's this scene towards the end where Guy Pearce and Pattinson are walking through the desert back to the car. And this upbeat pop song called, I had to look it up, it's called Pretty Girl Rock, starts to play as they're walking through the desert. And the scene cuts and it's later, and the source of the music is it's playing in the truck. And Pattinson is just sitting in the passenger seat alone, singing it to himself.
Nice.
He said, I don't know if it's supposed to be sad or funny, but it's kind of both. And it kind of puts a different tone in this relentlessly bleak cycle we've had through the whole movie. So yeah, I was really excited for this, and it wasn't a letdown. So, like I said, it's not like, you know, fantastically overly great or anything, and it's not like, you might get the wrong idea when I say there's a lot of, like, quietness and stuff like that, and them not doing much, but it's all engrossing. There's no time where it feels slow or slowed down or anything. The whole movie's right there, because you know, even in those quiet moments, that they're building to something. Like I said, it kind of reminded me of a Tarantino movie, where you just kind of had to hold out, because those spurts of violence would just come when you weren't expecting them, and you were just kind of waiting for that next one to happen. So there's always that impending tension going on. So yeah, I was very worried about that disappointing. So thankfully it didn't. Okay, my notes have moved over here now.
So now he's definitely not staring at you guys.
Where am I gonna start? Okay. Our next movie. Oh God, what happened here? I'm just gonna tell you this up front right now. Our next movie is one of the worst movies of the year. Okay, so I'm almost at 180 now. I might be after last night. I don't remember. It's called Mall. It's... Well, behind the camera we got a lot of stuff going on before anything else. When I first saw the poster, I wasn't sure what it was. Because, well, here's the thing. It said Mall, it said A Day to Kill, and it said Lincoln Park. I wasn't sure which one the title was, between Mall and A Day to Kill. And then, there's the whole Lincoln Park thing. I'm gonna be totally and completely honest with you. When I first saw the poster, I thought it was just like a poster for a Lincoln Park concert movie.
Mm.
That's what I thought.
In a mall?
I didn't know what the fuck the Mall and A Day to Kill was.
Okay.
A Day to Kill was the original title. I don't know if it's still going by that or not. And I don't know if it might have been the name of the book, too. I don't know. The book is by Eric Bogosian, the author and star of Talk Radio. Who's like this really renowned playwright. And the book was co-adapted by Vincent D'Onofrio, who also co-produced it and is in it. The Lincoln Park thing was, the guy's name is Joseph Hahn. Apparently he is the DJ for Lincoln Park. I had to Google that. This is his directorial debut. That's right, the director of this movie is somebody from Lincoln Park. Adapted from a book by Eric Bogosian, co-adapted by Vincent D'Onofrio. This is such a weird combination, I didn't know how to fathom it at first. But I liked the story, I liked the plot when I read it. All it said was, characters converge during a mall shooting. Or a guy's killing spree at a mall. So my thought was, holy shit, elephant inside a mall? That could be awesome. Devastating, but awesome. The last thing this movie is anything of the quality of Elephant, for starters. Okay. Let's talk about the opening scene. The opening scene is a trailer. A very cliche, trailer trash, redneck trailer. And standing in the doorway is an uncredited Mimi Rogers. And she is a trailer trash mom. And speaking of the Rover, it's funny I went in this order. The kid that goes on the shooting spree is the kid from Animal Kingdom. And so she goes in and she's making breakfast, and she asks him what he wants. And he's not answering. So she says, "Oh my God, you're just like your father." And then he comes out, and he's wearing like a sleeveless flannel vest, and he's got the hair on the sides of his head shaved off. And he just looks like this. He looks like he practically lives at Walmart. And he's pointing a gun at her. And she doesn't even notice this. And he shoots her. And her response is to put her hand to her stomach and say, "Did you just do what I think you just did?" And as she's dying, he soaks the trailer in gas and sets it on fire. And grabs his guns and drives to the mall, while we have this really obnoxious opening credit scene that's a bunch of noise and fucked up. I thought my copy of the movie was fucking up, but it's just the credit sequence thinking it's cool. So yeah, and it basically builds it up as, this is one of those, I listen to heavy metal, like, you know, like the Slipknot lyrics, where it's just a dude shrieking. while this credit music's going on, this guy's headbanging while he's driving to the mall ready to kill everybody. But that's not the most unbearable thing in the movie. The most unbearable thing in the movie is what we see next. It's a kid laying there in the grass outside the mall, just loitering. And I guess this is a common thing because the security guard's on a first-name basis with him. And this kid is the fucking lead character of this movie. This horrible, horrible character. One of those... Okay. You know when you go to the mall, for whatever unfortunate circumstances get you there, and you see those kids walking around where they're like... They're all philosophical, and they're under the impression that they know the way of the world because they're 15 and nobody understands them. One of those people is the star of this movie. And he meets up with this girl who is this total blank slate. This girl, I don't know her name or where she's from, but this is probably one of the worst performances I have ever seen. And he guides her around the mall, basically saying, this is everything about life that I know because I'm so wise and philosophical. And when she asks him how he knows all this stuff, I swear to God, his response is, I collect observations. This is the guy that's going to lead us through this movie. I kind of wish this is where the killing spree had started. So, I can't tell. That might be. She had red hair in the movie. So, he's walking around, and he's the guy where he says, like, Orwell says we live in a machine. And then there's... fuck it. And it just tries to do a whole bunch of visual standout things that are, like, right in your fucking face. But the reason he's showing this girl around is because he's in love with her. She has no interest whatsoever, and she's a bit of a psychopath. We learn later, but he's in love with her for some reason, even though she has the personality of a fucking brick. But, you know, whatever. That's what movies do. So, then we meet Vincent D'Onofrio's character, who, actually, to get to know his character, we need to know Gina Gershon's character first. Gina Gershon is married, she's got kids, she's got a dog named Taco. And she basically dresses all slutty. Because what happens is... Is there a problem?
No. We'll talk off camera. Go ahead.
And she's really, really slutty and does the thing where she dresses basically in hopes that somebody will practically rape her. So, now that we know her, we have D'Onofrio's character. Apparently D'Onofrio is some kind of sex offender. We don't really know for sure, but he's constantly referred to as a pervert, and all the cameras in the mall are watching him. What we learn from the kid takes us through this whole introduction of all the characters that we're gonna need to know for this story, because he collects observations. Somehow he knows that D'Onofrio loves to bang stewardesses even though he's married. And everywhere that he's done it, and all his perversions and everything. And apparently he did something to have the cops watching him whenever he's in the mall. So Gina Gershon, being the character that she is in a dressing room, changing with the door open, knowing that he's watching her. And this gets picked up on the security camera, so security comes in and takes him out and puts him in a little... they kind of interrogate him a little bit, and then they put him in the back of a police car. And this is where he is when the chaos happens. Our other character is Peter Stormare, who owns a tuxedo shop that the guy worked at. Now, this guy looks fucking insane and off his rocker, and he kills his mother, he burns down the trailer, he grabs all the guns, we don't know where he got them from, and he's just gonna lay the place to waste. Well, we learned the whole reason for this shootout apparently is because Peter Stormare fired him from the tuxedo shop. And that's all. So he does the thing, he's trying to be all evil and badass, so he puts on a tux before his rampage. I think that's supposed to be cool or something, but whatever. What this movie is those teenagers that go really over the top and get really loud because they think they're awesome and they're trying so hard to impress? That's basically this movie personified. Those teenagers. This movie is like a teenager that thinks it's so cool. That's what it felt like. And there's so many... I said, I know it's an overused criticism, but there are so many fucking pretensions in this movie that I can't even, like, just put it... Okay, here's the problem. I just said Eric Bogosian wrote this book. I don't know how much they changed the book. I'd like to think a lot. And he also wrote Talk Radio, which is practically a masterpiece. You could say that Talk Radio is a bit preachy. And a bit, you know, about ranting and raving. But there was something so effective about the way that Talk Radio did it. That you totally believed that all that stuff was coming out of that character's mouth, whether it was Bogosian's real thoughts or not. Here, I don't know what... I don't know if we're supposed... I don't know. This movie just constantly has me saying, I don't fucking know. I guess we're supposed to buy that this kid is all as wise as he thinks, because the movie never does anything to say otherwise. We're just supposed to believe that this 15-year-old kid is all world-weary because he's in love with a girl that doesn't love him back, and then he hears something. Let me tell you about this plot point. The whole mall shooting thing is not even really the movie. It's like the setup, and then it goes into something a whole different thing. Most of the movie is not even at the mall. Okay? Because we have two different things going on here. The guy only kills a handful of people, really. He just sets fires every now and then. Harming not that many people. So, he goes... Okay, this 15-year-old kid goes to a bar. Okay? And Gina Gershon is there. And now he really thinks he's the bee's knees now. He already thinks he knows all the ways of the world, but now he has this to add to his resume. I saw a guy on a stretcher, and I think he might have been dead. It's like, oh great, now 15-year-old kid thinks he's seen some shit. Add that to the Orwell quotes and the I collect observations. But no, this kid walks into this bar, and I guess the bartender feels for him after being at the mall. Because here's the thing. There's a couple of things wrong with this. You remember that old cliche that everybody loves to point out, where in movies you can go to a bar and just say, get me a beer, and they just hand you something?
Yeah.
Without saying what kind it is? This kid walks into a bar at 15 years old, walks up to the bar. The bartender says, what can I get you? The kid says, a beer. And the bartender hands it to him, has a sympathetic look on his face, and says, it's on the house. Number one, 15-year-old kid walked right in. Dude gave him a beer without specifying what kind. Then told him it was on the house. Just how many things are wrong with, like, 2 lines?
The liquor license in this place is gone if someone finds out.
And then he meets Gina Gershon, and that's where this movie takes into a whole different direction for some reason. This now turns into her deciding she's going to seduce this kid. And she does. They go to a hotel, and they bang. And that's where a lot of the movie takes place, in that hotel room. And the movie just gradually becomes this. Yeah, once again, all the movie can have me say is I don't know. I just don't fucking know what this movie is doing. At all. So, then we have our other thing going on. D'Onofrio was in the police car. The dude came down and blew the police car up, but he just managed to get out just in time. But he broke his arms, and like I guess the cuffs are like welded to him or something from the explosion. So he can't move his arms at all, but he manages to get himself to his own car and sits in the back seat. And then that's where the main kid's friends come back. It's like the 2 guys and then that girl he's in love with. This is when we learn she's a fucking psychopath. They recognized him from when he was being escorted out by the cops. And they're like, you know, hey, you're the pervert, aren't you? And, you know, she stands over him and says, like, you know, she offers to flash him because he's a pervert. And then they just kind of torture him. and then they all leave, and the girl stays behind. The girl that was supposed to be the love interest to the main kid. And basically, at this point, the movie becomes something else. She climbs into the backseat of this car, and basically proceeds to sexually torture D'Onofrio's character. And it's really unpleasant. His Full Metal Jacket scream started to come out. It's like, wow, I haven't heard those for a while. So yeah, after what I've just told you is pretty much the whole movie. So if you can decipher what the fuck this movie is trying to do or what it's trying to be, please let me know, because I happen to watch the thing from beginning to end and I'm fucking lost. And probably not in the way that I, not in the, like, this movie's, above my intelligence or shit like that. I don't know. Like I said, the pretensions are out of control, for starters. Because there's this whole other thing where the kid, like... I guess the kid has a beast inside him that's just waiting to get out or something. Because there's like 2 or 3 scenes where he's looking in a mirror, and the, like, rock music plays and the visuals get distorted, and he starts to turn into a wolf. I don't know.
You may know the girl. She is actually the sister of somebody you know.
Cody Smith McPhee?
That's right.
I was like, that name couldn't be, there had to be a relation.
Yep.
Well, we certainly know who's talented there. Yeah. And they write these it's funny how they write these teen characters. This is probably one of the worst scripts ever. I'm sorry, Vincent D'Onofrio. I'm a really big fan, but I don't really know what happened here. Like I said, I don't even know anything about the source material. Maybe Bogosian was having like an off day. Maybe he was on acid or something. This is like... Well, this is one of those cases where, like, say for instance, I don't think it's supposed to be irony either. But remember how I said this girl is practically emotionless until she's sexually torturing somebody? She basically turns down the main character. There could be so many reasons to turn this guy down, mainly because he's just a fuck. But she looks him dead in the eye and says, "You're really unexciting."
This was written 14 years ago.
And then, God.
2000 is when this was written.
The book or
the
script?
book? The book itself.
Anyway, and I don't know who was writing these teen characters or who they think teens are. I mean, I know, teens have pretty much become caricatures nowadays. Yeah. But even so, there's a scene in this movie where a teenage character says whatever, just totally out of context. Like, it's not even in response to anything. It's just because he's a teen, he says whatever.
The cool thing to do is say whatevs now.
Yeah. And it's so pathetic how hardcore it's trying to be. And, like I said, it's just like, it's that kid at school that thinks he's a real hard ass. Like, this movie is the kid you went to school with that would come to school saying, "Oh yeah? You had cereal for breakfast. You know what I have for breakfast? My dad's fist." It's like that kid as a movie. That's basically what it is. And I just don't know what the fuck they were doing here. I don't know. I don't know what it's trying to say. I don't know what it's trying to do. I don't know if the ending is trying to tell us that people learned something or didn't learn something. Or if things are just going to go back to the way they were. I don't know. And I really don't care. In fact, I never want to talk about this movie again.
We might have to.
Oh,
the way you're talking.
Oh, God. Everybody that made... once again, I'm sorry, D'Onofrio, I really am. But anybody involved in this movie should be fucking embarrassed. Oh, my God. Okay. I guess I should put something on the table here real quick before I go into our next movie.
I know what this one is.
Our next movie is The Inbetweeners 2. Which apparently is like murdering the box office in the UK. From what I hear. Apparently The Inbetweeners was a TV series that spawned a movie that came out last year, which I did see. The trouble is I really remember nothing about that first movie. Almost nothing. Really. And so this one came out, and so I figured I'd have to do this video, so I watched it. Now, here's the thing that I got while looking around. First off, obviously it was a TV series, and now it's been 2 movies. And apparently this, the Inbetweeners in general has a really, really big fan base in the UK, mainly. Really, really passionate fan base. It's one of those. I've also been reading around and noticed that this is apparently one of those movies where the fan base is so passionate that they just kind of sit in their mother's basements on the internet 24 hours a day just looking for bad reviews of this movie so they could leave comments to the reviewer how much of a piece of shit they are. Well, chances are you've been looking for a long time, day after day, so you've eventually found this one. Hello! I'd love to know what you're about to say, but frankly, I won't be hearing it anyway, so...
Yeah.
Okay. Let me talk about this. Now, to my understanding, I've heard a lot of people say you don't have to have seen the TV series, to watch these movies. Which is good, because that's exactly what I did. So, and I don't plan on starting anytime soon either. But, to get a benefit of the doubt, maybe the TV series has a lot more than this, you know, without the confines of only being an hour and a half, but, you know, fuck it. I remember watching the first movie and just thinking it felt a lot like British American Pie, which I'm sure is probably a comparison that has happened a lot. Well, here's the problem. For starters, there weren't many things... I didn't know how much I would have to remember about the first movie, but I just kind of trusted my gut and went with it. I didn't really care to Wikipedia the first movie again and refresh my memory or anything. Because it's one of those movies that just went right in and out of my head. It was just them doing the, hey, we're teenagers and we party and there's, you know, bathroom and sex humor, the end. That's really all that it was that I remember. So... it starts, and it does that little fake out where it kind of makes you think you're watching a different movie. It kind of looks like one of those, like, kind of like, That's If Badass Them came to mind, actually. They're in cloaks, and they're walking through the dark woods, and it's like mystical writing and everything. It looks like a Merlin miniseries or something. But it's them on their way to a costume party, but... it's funny because, you know, it wasn't a real costume party, they were just pranked and they showed up as Harry Potter characters. What nerds! Slams the door in their face. It was like when it was in Alison Hannigan and Christina Milian and all them showed up at Stifler's party. That's basically what it was. So, the main plot is, their one friend, the only guy's name I remember is Will. Will's the one that went as Harry Potter. He's like, he's British Jason Biggs is what he is. He even looks like him. So, I mean, if you need more comparisons. And then we have our British Stifler, who has moved to Australia, and cons them into thinking that he's like knee-deep in pussy. So, he's like, come over here and, you know, see how awesome I am with my new life and how rich I am. So they buy it for some reason and go to Australia. And then there's a whole bunch of idiot plots. There's... okay. What do we have going on here? For starters, there's, the one guy. We have our, actually, let me go ahead and talk about the characters real quick as far as their personalities. When I read into this, I saw that, because I was thinking, you know, what the fuck do people see in this? Apparently it's the characters that everybody loves. That's why it has such a following, because people really relate to the characters. But the problem with that is, as much as they try to give the characters distinct personalities, I still just see surface things. Like, with Will, you have the nerd who's always making an idiot out of himself in front of girls. With the one kid, you have the, he has, like, the blonde spiked hair. And he's basically the straight role, where he's the guy who's too shy and lets all the bad things happen to him, while all the supporting characters get to do the flashy things around him. You have, like I said, you have their Stifler, who, you know, thinks he's... totally and completely knows the way of women and is always making the gross humor and the sexually offensive remarks and all that. And then you have the weird guy. That's there. There's in this particular case, one of many things the weird guy does is wears a skirt because he was Hermione when they went as Harry Potter characters. And his balls are hanging out of it. And these balls are eventually licked by a dog. And so on. He's the guy that's not afraid to whip his dick out at any moment. But because he thinks it's right. Because he's weird. I guess. But it's alright. He's the guy who does all the weird shit thinking it's normal while everybody else looks on like saying, dude, you're weird. That's it. That's all these characters are. Like I said, that one, Will is so Jason Biggs, he fucking looks like Jason Biggs. But anyway, now that we have our characters out of the way, spike-haired straight man has a psychotic girlfriend. Who basically, to punish him whenever he acts like he's gonna break up with her or do something she doesn't like, she starts to cut up his clothes. She cuts up his hoodies. And when he's in Australia, she makes videos of herself cutting up his clothes and sends them to him. And there's this idiotic scene that devolves into its own plot, where he's Skyping with her, and he's like, that's it, I've had enough, I'm gonna break up with her because she's crazy. Of course we know this early in the movie, that's not going to happen. A big problem's gonna happen. Well, we meet, the guy's uncle. The guy's uncle is one of those uncles that's there to basically make the same two jokes over and over again. And call everybody pussies and all that. So, he's there trying to break up with his girlfriend via Skype, and this guy is in the room. And the guy says, I don't know how the fuck this works, because they needed a dumb plot and an easy way to get there. The uncle off camera says, will you marry me? And of course she thinks it's the guy that said it. So, he could simply say, no, this guy right here, right off camera just said that, not me. I don't want to marry you. I'm going to break up with you. No, he just runs with it. And she thinks she's going to get married to him. And he basically just accepts it. And that is a whole plot in its own through the whole movie. That's how easy they're grabbing for shit, for conflict. Then there's the conflict with Will, where he meets a girl. By the way, I do remember that he had a girlfriend at the end of the first one, because that was like the whole point of the first one. Not like a Bond girl. Not even mentioned in this movie. Not even once. Fuck the first movie entirely. Just completely. That's like when they didn't put Toothless in How to Train Your Dragon 2 very much. It was like, oh, so much for training the dragon for a whole movie. So, he's going after this girl, and she's basically, if this had been an American movie, I swear to God, this would have been Taylor Lautner. She likes this sensitive backpacker with dreadlocks and no shirt named Ben. Yeah, there's a Will and a Ben in this movie.
That's great.
And they're enemies, actually.
That's hilarious.
And she's kind of sending mixed signals. Because she's really, really happy. And when she's really happy to see somebody, she grabs them and kisses them on the lips. And that's just her character. She's very, very grabby like that. So when she does this to Will's under the impression that, this is basically what he's going to do. This is his desire for the rest of the movie, is to obtain her, and to get her away from Ben so he doesn't get her first, because he, you know, he's sensitive and plays the guitar and has dreadlocks and he's a piece of shit, and, you know, he's basically in place, he's in place of the jock character that you'd see in a normal movie like this. It's the same character, just as a slightly different trait. And that's pretty much, I don't think the other two really, the other guy, the Stifler guy has, like, another story about a girl, but they don't even get into that till later. What it's mainly building up to is this water park called Splash Planet that he really, really wants to go to. So he convinces them all to go there. And naturally, Will doesn't initially want to go, but it just so happens that his girlfriend, or who he wants to be his girlfriend, can get them all tickets. And he wants to see her in a bikini. So that's why he goes. Real romance at its finest, by the way.
Yeah.
I know it's a teen movie and everything, even though they're like 20-something. But regardless, you know. And the whole movie is kind of building up to this water park. So, here's the thing. Remember when I said this is basically like a British American Pie? Well, we kind of have all of that old humor there. All the bathroom humor, all the gross out humor. You can see it all coming from a mile away. Now, this is like, you know, polarizing the British box office, and it's got, you know, a fan base that's willing to beat the shit out of anybody that says anything bad about it. But this is also a movie that devotes about 20 minutes to a scene at this water park, where it's kind of like they kind of put all their eggs in one basket, hoping this was going to be the big payoff. Even though it's the centerpiece, it's not a climax or anything. We start off with a pedophile joke, where the two guys are hanging out in the lazy river and all the parents are suspicious of that. To the point that the guy actually trips and falls and his face lands in a little kid's area. And a dad spots this and tries to drown him. He, as they say in the movie, he actually waterboards him, like for real, in the lazy river. And then the weird kid here, you know, the weird guy that has quirks about him. I think this was supposed to be their big, huge, massive payoff. Well, with the fan base and the following that it has, you would think the big, gigantic payoff is something really clever and out of nowhere, right? Nope. The big, giant payoff involves a mixture of a water slide and irritable bowel syndrome. And yes, by the end of this scene, a character does end up covered in shit, thus making him projectile vomit all over everybody. You're really, really pushing that envelope, aren't you? You're really, really just amazingly original and really worthy of a rabid fan base. Just really breaking down barriers everywhere. Wonderful. Now, and then, as if that's not enough, our next scene, they get stranded in the desert. I really wish Guy Pearce and Robert Pattinson had walked by them. But, sadly, that did not happen. They get stranded in the desert, and their car breaks down, and they're basically under the impression they're gonna die. So, weird guy gets the impression, you know, I hear in situations like this you can keep from dehydrating by drinking your own piss. Great. We've had shit and we've had projectile vomiting. Why not throw piss into the mix? It's a little late to the party, but just go ahead. Just throw your desperate ideas out there as much as you can. So there's that. Okay. And then obviously it ends in the, you've only been stranded for 2 hours joke. There's not one single original joke in this movie that I can think of. There is one funny thing where the Stifler character misidentifies the term stud farm. That's kind of funny. But, and there's a line every now and then. There's a scene where, Will tries to win her over by playing the guitar. That scene is kind of funny. But overall, there's nothing original about this. Some of the worst comedies, they're ripping off. I got some Van Wilder vibes from this movie. Fucking Van Wilder vibes I got from this movie. But no, apparently this is like the bee's knees right now in the UK. And fuck you if you think otherwise. Fuck you if you think irritable bowel syndrome and projectile vomiting is not the height of hilarity. Alright, so yes, we have all of that on top of these one-note characters that the fan base will try as hard as they possibly can to convince you are worth seeing the movie for, and are their own great characters with their own great character traits. I didn't see them, but, you know, more power to you if you did. If you enjoyed the movie, that's fine. I'm not trying to condescend you or anything. Just settle down, because this movie's kind of a piece of shit in more ways than one. So, this movie's such a piece of shit, it should be falling down on the characters in it. Okay. Our next movie is a movie that came out at Sundance called God's Pocket. Another Philip Seymour Hoffman leading role. It was apparently right before A Most Wanted Man. It's not getting near the attention for obvious reasons once we go through it. It was the directorial debut of John Slattery. Yes, that John Slattery from Mad Men. And the book is based off Pete Dexter's novel. Pete Dexter's the guy that wrote The Paperboy. And this movie it's a really, really short, condensed movie. It's about an hour 25. And God's Pocket is basically the place that they live in, the little hellhole all these characters live in. We get kind of the history of it through a narration by Richard Jenkins, who plays like a reporter or a journalist that reports on the city. He's like the one column that everybody in the city reads. Sometimes he pisses them off, makes them look bad, but he's still famous regardless. And the movie actually starts at a funeral. Because we're 3 days ahead. We see the funeral and then we go back 3 days. And it's, this is the second movie that starts with, the very first scene of the movie is Philip Seymour Hoffman banging his wife. There's Before the Devil Knows You're Dead with Marissa Tomei, and there's this with Christina Hendricks. It's always a hot wife, too. Go, Hoffman. Good on you. And they're married, but she has a son who is his stepson, who is Caleb Landry Jones, I think is his name. The kid on the bike that saw the bone in No Country for Old Men. He's played a lot of weird characters. Sooner or later, he's going to play Michael Pitt's brother. That's how weird his characters are. And he is this totally psychotic character. Like, he still lives in his mom's house, and his mom still sees him as her little baby, and everything's great. But when he's out in the world, the dude is insane. He's constantly whipping out a knife. He's dropping racial slurs left and right. And nobody in the town likes him and thinks he's dangerous. And he works kind of like at a construction site. So eventually, he's berating this older black guy in front of everybody, just dropping racial slurs left and right. And the guy finally gets fed up. Now here's the thing, going back. Not to say I was expecting a bloodbath from this movie or anything, but just hear me out for a second. I read the synopsis for the movie, and it was, Philip Seymour Hoffman's character's stepson dies in a construction accident. And nobody's sorry about it. So we know that they did something to him at the construction site. And they're trying to cover it up as an accidental death. And when we meet this character, he is basically the fucking devil. He's going around the room, like, whipping a knife out, bragging about how he's gonna, like, slaughter cats and shit. And just insulting and threatening everybody in his wake. Well, after meeting this character and after having read that synopsis, I was like, oh my god, what fucking horrible thing do they do to him that he absolutely deserves? Do they, like, drop something on him? What horrible, horrible thing happens to him? The accident is, the black guy he's been berating stands up and hits him over the back of the head with something. And he just drops dead. That was what they were building to. But he couldn't have been too mangled for a plot point later, which I'll get to. Now, the thing about it is, Hoffman's character has criminal ties, mainly with John Turturro. So his wife gets hellbent and she's devastated, so she's like, you know, I don't think it was an accident. You need to ask around and find out what really happened and take care of what needs to be dealt with. And that's basically it. This movie is really, really, like, stale, I guess. And just very, very dull for the most part. There's this plot point they throw in, like, really, really late, where Hendrix's character has an affair with Richard Jenkins' character. And I guess that's just like, well, we've pretty much run out of story. Let's throw in a new one just so we can make it to the end with a legitimate runtime. So, or in the book's case, you know, over 100 pages. So, eventually, there's another subplot with Eddie Morrison from a lot of British movies. Happy Go Lucky, The World's End. He's on Ray Donovan. A lot of movies, and he's a really good actor. He's playing The Undertaker. He's pretty much the only... He's like the kind of the comedy relief character. And they go into the funeral, and Hoffman can't afford the caskets. So he has to basically physically move the body and put it somewhere else. And that becomes its own plot, but it basically becomes the trouble with Harry for a little bit. And that's where I was talking about, where I said I guess they couldn't have done anything too bad to his body because this plot point had to happen. And that's about it. We got a little bit of the trouble with Harry, we got an affair side plot, and just like dull, hey, crime happens here stuff. It's really not enough to sustain a feature-length movie at all. And then there's, I mean, yeah, like what I was talking about with the Rover. This is another one of those movies that kind of has those sudden bursts of violence. There's a really vicious eye gouging in this movie that really caught me off guard. And there's this older woman that lives with her. I don't know if she's his mom or his sister, or how she's related to him exactly, but she is armed, and she has scenes that kind of burst into unexpected violence. And those scenes kind of snap you out of the dull. Like I said, it's not like you need a bloodbath to be interesting, but with a movie like this, it kind of, you know, adds a little bit of an effect when that stuff kind of comes from out of nowhere. It gives the movie a little spark of life that's extremely missing. Hoffman is fine. The whole cast is more or less fine, but there's just... It doesn't even feel like a feature-length movie, really. It's like a short, really, that they just tried to expand, more or less. This probably would have made a pretty decent short at, like, maybe 20 minutes. You could cover the whole movie in 20 minutes, for sure. But if you take out the affair subplot, probably. So, yeah, I wasn't big on it. A Most Wanted Man is definitely where you want to go for a Hoffman swan song, so... And with that, you know, being, you know, such a great part for him, I think that's another reason Godspeed has really been overshadowed. Not so much that, you know, one Hoffman performance outdoes the other, also just, the movie's just that dull. That even that can't bring it that much attention.
That's a shame.
Our last movie is a very interesting indie movie called Coherence, which I started to hear a little bit of, like, it just kind of, like, popped up on the radar last minute. And then, shortly after that, I started to hear some feedback for it. And it sounded interesting. It's another one of those ones. That the genre's just growing and growing. The indie sci-fi. With not very many effects. But, you know, uses tension. It's kind of hard. This is another one of those ones where I don't really know what's spoilery and what isn't. It's probably best to just go into it blind, like when I was talking about the one I love last week. But to give you a basic outline, these 6 to 8 people have gathered for this little dinner party on the night that a comet is happening. And we get a sense that this comet might be causing strange occurrences in a Twilight Zone kind of way. Like, what was the Twilight Zone episode called where all the people on the street, like, went insane and went after each other? I can't remember the name of it now, but, It kind of felt like that a little bit, only indoors. You know, the power goes out and their cell phones randomly break. And there's just strange things happening. So they kind of stay, for a while it's just a dinner party. Like for the first 25 minutes or so, it's just them making conversation. But the thing about it, it's not just like a meandering thing. It's like kind of setting up the characters, and some of the things that are kind of said, like with just a little bit of context or just kind of like throwaway lines, will possibly be important later. And they start, what happens is they go outside to kind of investigate, and all the power is out on the street, except for a house at the end of the street where everything is lit up. So their plan is basically to decide whether or not to communicate with this house, and if it's safe or not. And that's probably all you should know if you want to go in as blind as possible. It's kind of hard to review without going into the specifics. I'll go a little more into it, but if you want to check this out, I would suggest stopping here and just watching it as blind as you can. Now that they're gone, I can tell you that what it is, it's still rather ambiguous. The whole movie is pretty ambiguous, as you can probably imagine. But we're doing this a lot lately. We're doing it so much. You know who's in the house?
Oh no.
It's their house with them in it. Only there's them, and then there's them. And they're trying to communicate with each other while it's really hard to explain, but it's a lot easier to put together when you watch the movie itself, but to explain it's kind of hard to put into words. But it's really interesting the way how it's this really high concept thing, and the whole magic of it is in the screenplay itself, because all of this had to be written this way, and the dude had to come up with this idea. And the way it's written and the way it comes out on the movie makes it's really interesting, and it really keeps you guessing and wondering, you know, like even when you feel like you have it figured out, there's always something that kind of throws a wrench into what you might be thinking, and you just have to keep guessing until it ends. And even, like I said, even when it ends, you may not really be that sure. It does kind of have that, you know, it might be a little grating for people, like, if they have, like, a thin patience, because that first 25 minutes is basically just watching a dinner party happen, and it keeps cutting to black, and, like, in mid-conversation and then going somewhere else, and it seems like it's not going anywhere, but then when the shit starts to go down, it's very intriguing and fun to kind of piece together. The trouble is about an hour in, it starts to get a little ridiculous. Not so much the way it takes it, but it just starts to get really melodramatic, and the acting starts to get really, you know, over the top and not as good or natural as it was. Like when they were at the dinner table, you had like a real naturalism, and they felt like real people. But when it got to when things were getting more out of control and more suspicious, that naturalism was kind of gone, and the acting wasn't exactly what it was before, and that kind of takes away from the whole experience, because the performances were what were holding it together, because that's basically what the whole movie is. That's how you build the whole tension, is how they're reacting to what's happening. And then there's a spontaneous nosebleed. Whenever you run out of ideas, that's what you've got to go to. Usually in horror movies, though, this isn't a horror movie per se. There are some things that are pretty creepy, but it's not a horror movie or anything. So it can't... I didn't feel like it could fully sustain its concept. Maybe if it had been, like, maybe 10 minutes shorter. If it only... It's about an hour 25, or about an hour and a half. It had been, I think at, like, a 75-minute runtime, it could have been just fine. It would have been just right, but that last third or so, or that last 20 or 15 minutes, it kind of brings it down and makes it something a little more ridiculous and less thought-provoking and interesting, and wanting you to know what's going on. But for the most part, I can say it's worth checking out just for that little... for a mind bender. I think that's it.
Alright, so, as always, we're going to run down the movies and we're going to get a final yay or nay. The Zero Theorem?
Yeah. If it's not your kind of thing, I'd go in with caution or not at all, but if that is your thing, I think you'll really dig it, so...
The Rover?
Yeah, definitely.
Mall?
Stay as far away as possible. You probably won't even... I don't even know how you're going to come into contact with it, really. So, no, don't bother at all, please.
The Inbetweeners, too?
Personally, I would say fuck no, but... that's just me.
God's Pocket?
No, not really. Unless you're like a Hoffman completist.
Yeah. And Coherence?
Yeah, it's worth... despite that, last little bit, it's still definitely worth checking out. So, yeah.
Alright, so ends another edition of AJ's Movie Reviews. Next week, AJ will be bringing you 6 more movies, and those are to be announced. And, funny tonight, I get to take my dad and my stepmom to Halloween Horror Nights. Should be pretty entertaining, so that video will be up on the channel very soon. More Disney Universal content coming in the next 2 weeks, and once I get back, we're going to have a lot of new reviews to do. So, AJ, any parting words?